be speaking about this full moon happening in Aries on October 17th with much intention. And what my intention is to relay to you more of my approach so that you can determine for yourself if inviting me in as an ally and helper on your healing journey is something that you may want or not. So, as a foundation, let's begin with what is a full moon. It is when the sun opposes the moon. So what is that opposition aspect all about? If we are to look at the zodiac from the sign of Aries through to Virgo, this is the part of the zodiac that is inwardly focused. It's about the self. And Virgo is that transition sign where the consciousness shifts to what is around me. And so the signs Libra through to Pisces is where one becomes aware of the relationships that are around them, right? Friends, acquaintances, loved ones, partners, and then we realize that we are actually a part of a culture, perhaps a religion. And then it is a realization that we are a part of society. We are a part of political governing of our country that we live in, and we are a part of certain populations or subgroups within society depending on our interests or our social positioning. And then we are a part of everything, the mystery of all that is. And so with this in mind, I want to highlight the fact that the sun is exactly conjunct Juno, illuminating this moon, who is exactly conjunct asteroid Aries, who is one of the justice asteroids. And also the moon is right there with Chiron, who represents woundedness and the healing journey. And this moon is also square another opposition, forming a grand cross. And these two planets are Mars opposing Pluto, and this will become exact later on in November, but it's building and it's an important part of this full moon, so I'm speaking to it now. So it's very important that I drive home a few points while we have Pluto in the last degree of Capricorn for the last time in our lifetimes. Pluto will station direct on October 11th and will enter Aquarius in November. So I want to speak about justice doing. I want to speak to this phrase that we know very well in the field of social work: the personal is political. And so what do I mean by this? I mean that everybody has social positioning. I am a white woman, descendant of settlers in the country of Canada. I am cisgendered, heterosexual. I will never know what it is like to be a person of color. I will never know what that is like. However, I can use the privileges that have been a part of my life in order to enact collective accountability. And so I want to point out that everybody has a social positioning. We are all born on different starting blocks, and the starting blocks are different because of the nature of the society and culture that we are born into. So, I have a very different upbringing than somebody who is born into a male body, however, identifies as female, is a person of color, and we could throw on so many other things onto there. Perhaps they have different abilities that are not witnessed by mainstream society and culture. So here we begin to see the differences, right, of people's social positioning and how that individual will have a very different experience of life than me. And this is important when I am speaking to trauma and the experience of wounding. Because, yes, I do agree that when an individual is wounded, and I would never project this onto somebody, if that individual identifies that they have been wounded, that they have been transgressed upon, yes, there is something going on inside that person's physiology. And it is extremely important to point out that that wounding is a result of systemic oppression, violence, and hatred. Right? So let's take an example because it'll be easier to digest. If we have let's say a young queer person in the school system who is repeatedly bullied at school, is it actually that there is some sense of woundedness or brokenness in that person? No. It is actually the fact that they are being wounded and oppressed and hated upon by our systems within our society, by our culture within society, and the relational getting away with that is permissible by people in authority. And so, yeah. It's very important that the healing journey of any individual must include a recognition of their acts of resistance. So let's break that down. In evolutionary astrology, Jeffrey Wolf Green often talked about resistance in the lens of evolution. That as a soul, it is natural that we will resist forward momentum evolution because there is a leaving from what is known and familiar and entering into what is unknown and unfamiliar. And that is most of the time difficult, right? And so there is this resistance. It's this natural force, and this happens, it's the law of physics, right? If there's a car speeding down the motorway, it is moving forward and there is a resistance against the wind. What I am speaking to in the social work context of using the word resistance is something different. I am speaking to the fact that, let's say that this young queer person has been let's say that they've been referred to a psychologist on behalf of the parents and the school counselor because they want to figure out what is wrong with this young person. Because let's say that this young person is mute with everybody except for their art therapist. How about, instead of pathologizing this young person who is receiving systemic hatred from society, why don't we see their muteness with everybody except their art therapist as an act of resistance? They are resisting being further wounded and subjugated to hatred by those whom they do not feel safe with. And obviously, there is some sort of structure of safety that has been collaboratively built with this art therapist and this young person. And so it's about us as individuals in anybody's life, whether we are social workers or family members or friends or whatever. It's on us to resist pathologizing people, resist saying, also resist projecting onto people that they are wounded. Maybe that's not how they want to tell their story. And so it's about using the power that each of us has to what is called collective accountability. We in the social work world, I am so grateful to have amazing colleagues who understand what that means, collective accountability. And it's about, it's the title of one of my mentor's books, Vicki Reynolds, Justice Doing Justice Doing at the Intersections of Power. And so this is about creating a culture of calling one another in, right? Once we understand these basics and fundamentals of the personal is political, then we can begin to shift our culture to around calling one another in rather than calling one another out when we notice somebody enacting their power unjustly in a relational way, right? Because we're all human, we all make mistakes, nobody's perfect, and that's okay. This is why it is a constant tending to rather than a rival at a position of collective accountability. That will never happen. We will never arrive there one day. It is a constant act and questioning of oneself and gathering together and really using our time together to be like, what is the best use of me, and how can I shoulder this person up, you know? And I think that this is where we tend to underestimate the power of how we can shoulder one another up. For example, simple acts of kindness can be monumental because everything is relational. We are relational humans. And so how we act and show up when we are dropping our kids off at school or entering the office at work or going to church on Sunday or, fill in the blank, all of those places that we show up is an opportunity for us to enact collective accountability. Are we paying attention to those around us? Are we paying attention that there's different social positionings and that there might be some times when we need to ask ourselves, like, okay, how would it feel if I was in that person's shoes right now? Oof, I would really love for somebody to come over and just give me a cup of water and a box of Kleenex and just be like, I'm here. You don't need to talk to me, but I'm noticing that something's not okay. And I just want you to know I'll be over there. you know? Like, it's just justice. It's just justice. It doesn't need to be rocket science. It's just showing up for one another, people. Yeah. And why am I talking about this? Because yeah, as I said, everything is relational. I'm speaking to the moon being illuminated by this Juno-Sun conjunction. Right? If we are not able to see the ways in which we are connected to others and the ways in which we will never know what it is like to be in that person's shoes, and so we try out different ways to meet them and to structure safety so that other people can be shouldered up, right? We live in this capitalistic society with, pyramid scheme everything, right? And that's why I I don't know if I did this at the beginning of the video, which is terrible, but I want to, say thank you to every human who I worked with in my social work years, because they taught me everything. They taught me so much. They taught me things that I would never learn anyplace else. And so the fact that I can stand here today and pivot and offer Soul's Compass healing is on the backs of having learned what I have learned through being in relationship with oppressed peoples, experiencing hatred and systemic violence repeatedly. And so, yeah. I also want to point out that I don't know. I feel like that's it, maybe. Um, what have I missed? I'm not sure. I've been speaking to this really in a collective way today, and I want to let y'all know that when we have this Mars in Cancer opposing Pluto in Capricorn, I really am wanting to drive home this point that the personal is political, that when experiences happen to individuals, they are a result of what is happening in the wider society. And so when I look at an individual's journey, it is never in isolation of that. It can't be. That's not nature. That's not how it works. So, and also with Mars and Pluto in opposition, there is this questioning, especially in the Cancer Capricorn axis, of power. Where do we have personal power? And this comes back to that resistance that I was speaking to. And if a person chooses to behave in any which way, I would invite us to, rather than pathologizing that, rather than further enacting and being an arm of this system of hatred and oppression, that we maybe take a step back, realize our social positioning and how that might be different from theirs, and how everybody reserves the right to have their own story and to tell their own story, and to and to make efforts of resistance to resist being further oppressed. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up this video. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Please, this is never a good thing for me to just like say this stuff and like post a video and not have anybody give me feedback. Please, this type of conversation is only, I suppose, worth having if there is a conversation, right? If there is reciprocity. So please write in the comments, what do you think about this? What does, when I use the words like collective accountability, what does that mean to you? You know, I can define that, but it means something different to each and every one of us. And it's important for us to be using these questions to really reflect on, yeah, what does collective accountability mean to me, and what is my position in that? And also reflecting on the word resistance, you know, and the fact that when trauma occurs to an individual, it is a byproduct of something bigger that society is perpetuating, right? And so I invite us to lean away from pathologizing and projecting woundedness onto people, and lean in to hearing people's stories of resistance, to how they structure safety in their life in a world that doesn't know safety. These are the golden nuggets to hold on to. This is what keeps me going and gives me belief and hope that we are here for one another, right? We're just simply here for one another. It's just justice. So thank you so much for listening, and I wish you all of the best. I would love to hear from you in the comments.